Welcome to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and engaging listeners on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. I'm your host, Captain Nostalgia, and joining me is my co-host.
Hey, Dan Rockwood. I am happy to be here.
And this is episode 353, where we are looking through the lens of Clive Barker's Hellraiser.
Somewhere beyond the light and the dark, beyond our secret desires and deepest fears, lies the door beyond all our limits.
We have such sights to show you.
Hellraiser, there are no limits. Rated R.
And joining me is the writer and director behind one of my favorite, not only horror films, but movies of this year. The writer and director behind the movie What Lies Below, Mr. Braden Dummeler.
Hello, sir. Thank you for having me. Very excited.
I am so excited to have you here. And I don't want to retread the ground that we've already established in our episode previously this month, but just kind of give an elevator pitch right now for What Lies Below.
Sure. So What Lies Below is about a young girl named Liberty, 16 years old. She's kind of socially awkward. She comes home from summer camp to realize that her mom has met a guy, and the guy is an absolute Adonis. So for the first time in young Libby's life, she has a little bit of a sexual awakening, and there starts to be some advances on both sides, and they go further and further until one night in the middle of the night, Liberty wakes up to a bright amber light flashing into her room. She goes to the window, she looks outside, and she sees the man, John Smith, standing just basking in the light on the edge of the lake. And then all of a sudden, John Smith just walks towards the light, into the lake, step by step, further and further, until he completely goes under, disappears, and the light turns off. And the rest of the film is, what the hell is up with my stepdad kind of thing.
And you guys can find right now, not only our episode with Braden that we did earlier in this month, we'll provide a link in the description below, but you guys can currently check out What Lies Below right now on all VOD and digital platforms, wherever you guys get your movies from. I highly recommend it. It's been one of my favorite movies of this year, like I said, and just go check it out. It is a weird, tense, anxious ride into just beautiful, stellar colors and just a wild narrative. So go check it out. But this is kind of a interesting episode for us here. We're a podcast that's so focused on mental health, and I feel like for a lot of us, 2020 has been a hard year on a lot of our mental health, just because of quarantines and COVIDs and the country shutdowns and people, not sure if they have a job and being furloughed, and the list goes on and on and on. And when we were coming up with the poll that we wanted to do for this month, Dan had the great idea of doing movies that helped our mental health throughout 2020. And the poll was 16 Candles, Hellraiser, The Two Towers, and what was the last one, Dan? Do you remember?
It was one of your films, so no, I don't remember. I can pull up the poll though if you like.
I don't remember. So I just don't remember. But Hellraiser 1, which I'm not gonna lie, surprised the heck out of me. I was prepared as soon as we put that poll up. I was like, all right, we're gonna be doing The Two Towers, and sure enough, I think it came down to the Two Towers lost by 4%. So you guys wanted to see Hellraiser. But before we kind of start talking about Pinhead and the Cenobites and the lament configuration and answering all of Dan's questions, I think we should just kind of talk about what are some of the movies or even TV shows that helped our mental health this year. And Braden, you being our guest, what is it about what movies in particular kind of helped you get through this year?
Oh, man. I have to say that when I am having, suffering from, spikes of depression or anxiety, I'm a real big fan of escapism. So films that just purely entertain, and there's not some grand theme or lesson to be learned. So for example, like anytime Coming to America is on television, I have to stop and watch. I just love Eddie Murphy. I love the barbershop and them all arguing about the age of Joe Frazier when he fought. I mean, it's so classic. You can't ever watch that. I can watch that movie a million times and still laugh at the same jokes. Another film's like Anchorman. I think it's like the most quotable film of all time, probably, in my opinion. But films that in my past that have really touched me and made sense to me in that regard, I thought Inside Out did an incredible job of dealing with mental disorders and talking about them, especially making them translatable for children, which I think is overlooked a lot. I don't think we talk about it enough with our kids, and I don't think kids ever get the chance to understand it, to learn about it early. And so as a result, we're playing all this catch up as adults because nobody ever talked to us about this stuff. And I thought that was so necessary, a film like that, to bring that to the mainstream and to children's eyes. So I really appreciate that film for doing that. But yeah, and then recently I've been going on like a Christmas binge because I'm unfortunately not going to really get to see my family much over the holidays, and so I watch Elf and Home Alone again, and you can't ever get upset with Kevin McAllister in front of your eyes, right? So that's pretty much the ones that have been keeping me afloat during this tough year.
Dan, I know that for you, it has been you've really been taking advantage of this time quarantining and just kind of diving into new films and franchises that you hadn't ever experienced before. The Scream and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, just to kind of name a couple. Also, A Christmas Story, which still baffles me. But what are some of the movies that have helped you kind of ease your mental health this year?
Yeah, man, this year, with the opportunities to be able to watch a lot of these different movies, my fiance and I planned, especially over the summer, a number of themed movie nights. One was 80s coming of age films, in which we screened The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, St. Elmo's Fire, and I think there might have been one other one in there. Fast Times at Ridgemont High. We watched that as well. And I, with the exception of The Breakfast Club, which I had only watched once, I had not seen any of those movies. So that was introduction. First time for me. Yeah, I know. So that's getting caught up on those was really great. We did an action movie weekend. Again, movies I never saw, including Top Gun, Total Recall, and forget what the third one was for that. It was like 80s action movies, but we did, even though Total Recall I think was early 90s, but we still fit it in there. But yeah, that's been the new stuff I've experienced, and then we've had a lot of just things that I love. I rewatched Shazam last week. That was my favorite movie of 2019. Star Wars has always been a huge part of my life, and I haven't sat down and really watched any of the trilogies super recently, so I'm thinking maybe this Christmas season this would be a good time to do that. And yeah, man, just watching stuff and just keeping it going. But that's definitely been, to name a few, some of what has helped me through. And you mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream as well. I did that this past October. Again, all for the first time, had never seen them before. And I loved both Scream 1 and 2 and A Nightmare on Elm Street 1, 2, and 3. Specifically, those I really enjoyed. The rest they were fine. I definitely don't dislike them, but those really stood out to me as highlights.
So just for the record, we've never actually talked about a Nightmare past our Nightmare episode. And at that point, when we recorded that episode, you hadn't watched any of the sequels yet. And it baffles me that you don't like any of the other sequels, but you like Freddy's Revenge. Like, that blows my mind.
Oh man, I got so much crap from Abby when I was defending the second film and saying what I liked about it. I have, after watching them, I did have like the definitive ranking, and I forget what they were, but I think for me it was 1, 3, 2, 5, 7, 6, 8 maybe, and 4, 8, something like that. But I would definitely need to revisit that. But no, the second movie is just so wonderfully bizarre and weird and homoerotic in all the strangest ways. Like, that's I didn't hate that. And just Freddy showing up at a pool party for some reason and going crazy. I really like that. But the third movie, which I know, Josh, you said rules. I loved seeing a team of dreamers come together and like take power over Freddy. Like, that was really cool to see.
Never forget the metal anthem that goes with that. And I can't remember the hair metal band that did the Dream Warriors actual song, but it's awesome. For me, like, as far as like mental health, I went through so my wife and I had a really rocky beginning this year. So January into March, we were bouncing back between trying to do Victims full time and working full time, and then also trying to look for a place in Richmond full time. So like, we're doing all of these things just almost every waking minute. Just felt like we were constantly busy. Then April, May, and June hit, and it's like this realization of like all of the previous 3 months crashing down and just experiencing depression. And for me, like, I just kind of like felt like very lethargic, like didn't really want to do anything. And The Simpsons were my best friends in those months. But I kind of, oddly enough, I came across this podcast that's one of my favorite podcasts called Best Movies Never Made. And basically they just explore scripts and concepts from movies that never saw the light of day. And sometimes they talk about it with the filmmakers and screenwriters. Sometimes they talk about it with other podcasts. And they actually had ended up talking about a Hellraiser reboot that they were aiming to do back in 2006. They're still somehow or another, despite the Weinstein's court battle, they're still in production of a reboot, which we can talk about later if we want. But the concepts that they were talking about really interested me. And so I really was kind of in this place where, like, I just needed rest. Like, I was overworking myself between doing things for Victims and then doing just life in general. And so I saw Hellraiser, the first one, a couple years ago, and didn't like it. In fact, I hated it the first time I saw it. And hearing them talk about it was like, I need to kind of give this another try. And so I sat down and watched it, and I was just blown away by this first movie. And from there, actually ended up just digging into the entire franchise. Just watch it. I think I binged all 10 movies and then ranked them on our website and on my Letterboxd within like 2 weeks of starting this journey. And man, we'll talk about some of these sequels too. They are some of the worst movies I've ever seen, and I've seen some real duds, but these sequels, they challenge those duds on an intellectual level that I did not think was possible. But I've dove into the source material for this, the Hellbound Heart and its sequel, the Scarlet Gospels. I've read the comics, and I just dove really headfirst into this, and then I ended up actually going back through some of the Halloween movies, and also ended up watching the Saw franchise again. So like horror has like really impacted my mental health, and kind of at the long list of all of those movies, just being able to discover other independent movies like Host or What Lies Below have also kind of kept that track going to get to experience this new wave of horror that's coming out. We were talking about The Beach House before we started, which is another movie that's streaming right now on Shudder that I just really enjoyed. And so just kind of getting to experience a lot of those things, rediscovering The Exorcist 2, which was a movie that I didn't inherently like the first time I saw it, and then I read the book and then rewatched the movie and just fell in love with it all over again. Well, I guess for the first time, but horror has kind of been my cornerstone as far as like movies and mental health go this year.
The Exorcist is a movie that I've also watched once, and I feel like I need to revisit because I was very young and I did not appreciate it the way that it was meant to.
It is a movie that I feel like I have a deeper appreciation for because it's not traditionally a horror movie in that sense. It is a movie that is a drama and a character study about a priest actually struggling in his faith, and then kind of happens to come up against something that challenges that just happens to have horror influence.
I like, and strangely enough, and this is like maybe an odd theme, but I enjoy horror movies that take a religious angle. I watched The Conjuring for the first time this year, and I actually really liked that element as well, the exorcism part of it. So that is cool to see. Very different from what we see in Hellraiser, which I watched it less than 12 hours ago, and I don't really know what I just saw. I need one of you guys to explain things to me because I'm so confused. There was a box, and then a guy got flayed alive, I think, and then there was a man with pins in his head. There was a lot going on in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So before we head to the commercial break, I will tell this story real quick. My wife had never seen any of these movies. And she had kind of seen some of the sequels. Like she would walk in, and I would be watching one of the sequels, and she walked in as I was watching Hellworld, which is the 8th movie in the film that also features a very young Henry Cavill. And we sat down yesterday to watch this. It was like one of the first things that we watched in the morning. We're sitting there eating like breakfast as we're watching this movie. And if you guys have seen Hellraiser, the movie opens up on Frank basically being like torn apart, and you just kind of get this like I don't even know like what to call it. Like it's just like these like four. It's like a wooden elongated box that just comes up with like nails, and like there's body parts attached to it, and it's like blood and like all of these like really grotesque things. And I'm just watching my wife's stomach turn while she's eating, and she's like, finally after a couple of minutes, she just looks at me and she's like, "Why are we watching this with breakfast?" And I was like, I gotta give the listeners what they want, babe.
I don't want this podcast to end your marriage.
Yeah.
You gotta know where the priorities are. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be as gory as it was. I guess I had no expectations, but I was impressed by the number of practical effects that were used. I feel like this was really done, and I'm always a fan when films. I definitely don't mind CGI, but I am a fan when there are more practicality being put to work, and that was really nice to see in this movie.
I was also really impressed. I I had seen it once when I was a kid, but I basically forgotten everything except for the imagery. And I watched it again recently, and I was still impressed with Barker and the way he uses his camera to tell the story and to create tension, and also his creativity with some of those monsters. I mean, I felt like I saw the inspiration behind some of Guillermo del Toro's best monsters in some of those, and I even felt like, did Tim Burton take some of this stuff? Like it really felt like I've seen these before, but more recently. So therefore, Hellraiser must have been perhaps the impetus of some of those designs and some of those inspirations. I even felt like Alien predated this, right? Alien.
No, this Alien predates this by
Yeah. Okay, I thought
11
so.
years.
Yeah, because I felt with the whole the monster with the tail thing, I felt like it was very Alien-esque. So that's the opposite. I guess he might have been inspired by Alien, but some of the other ones they made me they remind me of Pan's Labyrinth and some of the other monsters we've seen from some of our greatest monster people today.
I never really made those comparisons to kind of like Guillermo del Toro and even Burton as well. That's a really great insight to. I can definitely kind of see the influence of like this film had on like Pan's Labyrinth and stuff like that. And this film is like really. It doesn't feel like it should be as influential as it is, and I think perhaps one of the craziest things about this movie is that it, much like what I was just talking about with the Exorcist, it's not your traditional horror movie. It is essentially at its core, it's like this twisted love story of almost kind of like Romeo and Juliet, like almost Shakespearean, of two lovers that are trying to come back together, and the challenges that they have to undergo in order to get there.
Absolutely. And I think they explore some interesting dynamics with, for instance, there's things that I forget the female character's name, but there's things that she gets away with that a male villain could never get away with, like inviting women to their home and just saying, yeah, let's just go upstairs. No woman's going to walk into that trap, Whereas men are like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's go up the stairs. Let's see what's up there. No big deal. Oh, this is a creepy room. Are we going to have sex yet? Kind of thing. So
there's no bed here.
Yeah, there's no bed here. There's just wooden floorboards. Like no man could ever get a woman to go that far into that room. I mean, she'd be out the door by the time she saw the cobwebs, on the walkway. So I thought that was interesting that Barker took advantage of that and used it to his to kind of tell the narrative. And just to go back to, wasn't there in Pan's Labyrinth, isn't there once she goes into the labyrinth, isn't there some sort of person that kind of tells her the evil doings? And they have that same look as the person with the exposed teeth in Barker's Hellraiser. The one where the teeth are like opened up as if you went to
that is so the cenobites you have are I want to just clear this for those of you guys that have seen The Mandalorian. The child is not Baby Yoda, it is the child. And or I'm not gonna say his real name in case you guys aren't up to date with it, but the season 2 reveals his real name, but we will refer to him as the child. Pinhead subsequently is also called Hell Priest in the franchise. It is not Pinhead, it is Hell Priest. But the Cenobites are Hell Priest, Chatterer, which is the guy with the teeth, and then Butterball is the dude with the sunglasses, and I can't remember what the female's name was. But yeah, I think you're right. It's been a while since I've seen Pan's Labyrinth, but it's been a movie that I have wanted to revisit for a couple years now. And I just actually need to buckle down and make the time to do it.
Yeah, it's crazy creative, and all art inspires other art. So I'm not taking anything away from Guillermo, but I definitely think that he might have been inspired by what was the one with the teeth that you said?
His name is Chowderer.
Chowderer. Yeah.
Chowderer.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I just remember this one kind of like priest in Pan's Labyrinth, in the labyrinth, that gave some sort of commandment or something to Pan, and I remember that same teeth, those exposed teeth, but I might be remembering another movie altogether. I'm terrible sometimes with that stuff. They just kind of mix together in my memory.
Well, it's funny. I think the reason that a lot of people associate Hellraiser with the Pinhead character, I know I just contradicted myself, is because when they originally shot this movie, the practical effects almost were deemed the other characters unactually able to speak. So like there's so much prosthetics on those other cenobites that they actually can't speak. Chowderer could only move his teeth. That's why you got the look that he gets there. And then same with Butterball. So like all of their lines ended up going to Doug Bradley, who plays the Hell Priest in this movie. And yeah, so we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Welcome back to Victims and Villains, where we are exploring the wild and weird world of 1987's Hellraiser. And Dan, I feel like I want to open this up for you. What are the questions that you have in trying to understand this weird movie?
Just what did I watch this morning? I'm on the Wikipedia page for the film now, and reviewing the plot, I feel like there are more things that fall into place. This movie seems to be one that it benefits from multiple viewings, and once you have a lot of the context of the end of the movie, the beginning more makes sense. And I said that to myself when the movie opened and you saw the strange box and it was being sold at a market. And I was like, this is important for some reason. I don't know why, but it is. And then we come to find that there's this whole family dynamic. And I think at its core, this movie is a family movie, and it shows marital stress. It shows strained relationships between a daughter or stepdaughter. And it shows, I guess, what happens when you have a incredulous relationship between a man and his brother's second wife, it says, because Christy, who's the daughter, her mother had died previously, and so this was his second wife. But it was just fascinating that you have this intricate, tight-knit family story with this hell supernatural storyline happening as well. So I thought that was really interesting to see, and I liked how I think Julia is her name, the wife, just started like luring men home to be eaten and devoured by Frank, so that he could come back to life essentially and be able to run away together, which I'm just going to say it, that marriage has problems. They need to talk some stuff out because there's a lot going on there. And she jumps on board way too quickly, in my opinion, of this grotesque figure in the attic is Frank. And she says, okay, well, I guess I'll murder for you or bring people home for you to murder so that we can be together. That was such a quick switch for me.
It's so crazy to see her in this movie, like going back and after seeing all the other movies and seeing her beginnings, because she comes back in the sequel, Hellbound, and we're getting into spoiler alert, just throwing that out there. She dies in this movie, and the next movie actually explores the dimension of this universe's hell, or the kingdom where the cenobites live. And if you guys are fans of this particular movie, or the second one as well, I would recommend checking out The Scarlet Gospels, which is Clive Barker's literary sequel to the original source material that inspired this movie. But they end up exploring it. She actually is like a high priestess within hell.
Wow.
And she's kind of like so it's her and Kirsty that have this like dynamic throughout the second movie, where it's kind of almost like the Cinderella versus like wicked stepmother. It's super bizarre, and you can kind of start to see a lot of those small seeds taking place here in this movie. And so kind of knowing like where she plays out in future movies makes this dynamic that she does here in this one extremely interesting to me, to where she is this like very shy, very quiet, closed off woman, and almost kind of snooty, kind of like standoffish a little bit, and but yet the way that she is able to kind of like start to reinvent herself as Frank, because eventually like she ends up being kind of comfortable with it. Like she's very hesitant to agree to these terms originally, and then eventually ends up kind of saying, okay, I'm on board with this, and going right into starting the process for like getting Frank his like flesh back.
Mm.
So how many sequels did they make to this movie?
10. Whoa. To this movie, it's 9. It's 8, or sorry, it's 10 total, 9 sequels.
My God.
Okay. And the 2011 Hellraiser, that counts as a reboot?
No. So that's a weird one. So the 2011 Hellraiser that you came across was Hellraiser Judgment? No, Judgment was the one that they did. Revelations is the one that you came across. And Revelations was the first sequel made without Doug Bradley as Pinhead. It was the, let's see, it was like the 4th or 5th direct-to-video sequel, because after 5 they start to explore the direct-to-video, and it gets real weird real quick. Not good. But this one, so like Revelations, the one that you came across, I kind of just want you to watch it just to see what you like, what you see in it. It's one of the worst ones in the franchise.
Okay.
But it's also kind of the one that's kind of like closest to like a remake that you can get. It's really weird to describe because like it's like this found footage styled version of like Hellraiser, but it's also like a reboot at the same time. It's stupid bizarre the way that they tried to like merge these two genres and concepts together.
Now, I know this came about in an age of, I mean, the 80s was the golden time for like slasher films, it felt like, when you got a lot of the Friday the 13th and its sequels and Nightmare on Elm Street and its sequels. So I know those are two super popular franchises, and I feel like Hellraiser is one that I've heard of. I've definitely seen the bad guy represented. Is it as widely appreciated, do you think, among the horror community as like the Nightmare on Elm Street series, or is it more of a core, like niche group of hardcore people who really, really like this movie?
You guys still there?
I'm here. I don't know if Josh cut out.
I can't speak to that question because I'm not aware of the kind of where it stands in the Rubicon of great horror films.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do know is the image of the Hell Priest or Pinhead, as he's often referred to, is probably, I mean, you have to call it one of the most iconic in all of horror history, right? You got Freddy Krueger, you got Pinhead. I mean, even if you hadn't seen Hellraiser, you know Pinhead. You've seen Pinhead, you know? And I think that goes a long way towards creating a brand that people want more of, you know? When you have something that the image is just so powerful that people are curious by it, right? And I love how the actual image of Pinhead kind of speaks to the film because it's masochistic, you know, where he is inflicting pain on himself by putting these pins into his head, and he's also like a puzzle piece. His face has all these different little parts to it, similar to the box that comes apart or goes back together throughout the film. So it kind of speaks to the language of the film itself as well.
That's so true. And you mentioned people recognizing this character and it being super prominent. I had never seen this movie, and I reckon the second the like screen image came up, I was like, oh, that's where this guy is from. Right. I know him.
Yeah, and it's definitely something you can't get away from, even if you're not a horror fan. You've seen Pinhead.
So one of the things that I've learned in getting into this fandom this year, my friend Gary is like a Barker, just super fan. Loves everything that man has done, whether it's Nightbreed or it's one of his like just books that a lot of people haven't heard of. He just is in it for everything. And one of the things that I've definitely found is I feel like Hellraiser is, while you can look at Pinhead and say, I know that guy, I feel like to kind of talk about the sequels is a different group. I definitely feel like this is a subsidiary fan because of how bizarre this franchise is and how kind of like subliminally sexual too this franchise is. I think that it's not everyone's cup of tea, and the fact that it dares to kind of go into some really weird spaces. Everyone doesn't really like it. But this for me personally, this franchise and this mythology fascinates me. I love the history that they've brought to the lament configuration. I love the fact that Pinhead's origin story was that he was like a general in the army, and he was like looking for pleasure to kind of, or escapism to kind of step away from, like, I think PTSD of the war, and like ended up finding this, like, out about the lament configuration, and that's how he became Pinhead. There's so much about this franchise that is just fascinating. And a lot of people have stepped in and done a really marvelous job at keeping those mythos alive. And then, as I've mentioned several times, there are a lot of these sequels that just do a job and basically light that mythology on fire just to make a quick buck.
It seems to always be the case with sequels. Well, say a lot of the time, not always. But it is funny how widely known this film is, and I have probably only heard the name in passing. I definitely recognize the main villain just from pop culture, like I mentioned before. You mentioned like the subliminally, like how like sexual this film is, and really how overtly sexual it is in a lot of ways. It is such a strange portrayal of things like sadomasochism, and showing that the difference between pain and pleasure, and the concept of following desire, right? Because Julia is married to Larry, but wants to be with his brother Frank, and instead of breaking it off, getting a divorce, whatever, they go through a series of secretive, adulterous, type situations, ultimately resulting in Larry's death and Frank killing him and stealing his skin, I think is what he did at the end.
Oh yeah.
So, we've got sex, we've got torture, we've got skin stealing. I mean, this movie has everything, just fun for the whole family for a 1987 audience.
Right.
So the costume design of this movie, it's interesting to talk about, because at the time that Barker was designing this, what the Cenobites should look like, he had basically his production designer kind of go into these underground sex clubs.
Oh, wow.
And like really kind of study the BDSM culture. And at that time, BDSM was a subculture in and of itself. It was not really talked about in wider circles, and this movie kind of legitimized it and put it on the map.
Mm-hmm. I mean, speaking of the costume design and like makeup and hair, I don't know if it's because I'm such a distance from the 80s, but as soon as that I forget her name, the main woman walks onto the screen, and Julia. she has that red hair that's kind of spiked up, Julia, and she has that almost red eyeshadow. I'm going, this one's the devil. I'm just going, this is bad. She's bad. I mean, they committed to details like that. I think that is a conscious choice, even if the 80s hair was already like that. I felt like they were doing stuff with her right from the beginning to kind of lay the groundwork. I love movies that do that too. Like it's overlooked too, is that, the whole reason that Frank comes back is because his brother leaks blood on the floor, and then the one person he finally has to kill in order to fully regain a human form is his brother. So it's great setup and payoff like that that he's doing and committing to it during the film.
I always appreciate when movies set things up and they pay off. You know, in a perfect world, every movie would do that. But so often it feels like there are plot points or things that just kind of fall flat. And you reminded me when you mentioned Julia with her red hair, and you're like, oh, like that woman's the devil. She's got to be. It reminds me of the trailer, and this is a random reference, so forgive me, but when the movie Red Eye came out, and the trailer for that film, to me, made that evil character on the plane, played by the same actor who plays Scarecrow in the Dark Knight trilogy. I forget his name, but I know he's very talented.
Cillian Murphy.
That man, yes. So he's great in Red Eye, but the trailers, they make him out to be like a supernatural figure, and I thought like, oh, like is he a devil? Is he like gonna sit next to this woman and like tempt her into doing something evil? Like what's gonna happen? And then nope, he's just a very regular, very normal person. Works for some bad guys, but he is that plot ended up being relatively grounded in reality. That's a movie I should rewatch. And this is, again, another aside, but I've been meaning to do like an airplane themed movie weekend, and that would be a good one to toss in there.
Absolutely. There you go. Flight Plan too is really, I remember Flight Plan, that I would think was Jodie Foster.
I really liked Flight Plan. That was good.
Yeah, there's a few, there's something about containing a story to one location and in a limited amount of time that makes creativity like kind of flourish sometimes.
I was actually a big fan of Phone Booth when it first came out.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yep.
Yeah, that was really good. I don't love that movie as much as I did when I was 12 years old, but I definitely thought that was a good one. And Sean Bean was in Flight Plan too. He was the pilot. He was the captain of the airplane.
There you go.
Great. But yeah, there's looking at all of the movies that came around in the 80s and seeing all their influences, and I think you had mentioned that there was some there appeared to be some influence from movies like Alien in here. And a story that I try to tell as many times as I can, because I think it's cool being a huge Star Wars nerd, is that the reason Alien exists is because Star Wars was made. It was launched in 1977. It was a huge success. So 20th Century Fox said, people are eating this up. We need to do another sci-fi movie, another space film. What do we have? And the script for Alien was on the desk at the time. And the executive basically said, good, go, greenlit, make it, get it done.
Oh my God, are you serious?
And so when the Blu-ray anthology I have, that was one of the behind the scenes stories of the story of how it got made. And yeah, so it was heavily influenced by Star Wars. The movie got made. That came out in 1979. And then Alien became so iconic. And then it was just the snowball effect of all of these movies kind of referencing each other and inspirations playing together. So I love seeing those different like inspirations in those movies.
Absolutely. I'm so glad they made Alien. That's one of my favorite films of all time.
It's so good. I got to watch, and this is the film nerd in me, which is a filmmaker I'm sure you can appreciate as well, but I'm in the Boston area, and one of our local theaters does a lot of film viewings of 35 millimeter and 70 millimeter film. And so they had a midnight showing of Alien on a 35 millimeter film print. And so I went and saw that. That was probably a year and a half ago now. And that was just such a fun experience being in the theater at midnight, seeing this great movie on the big screen. Like, it was such a good time.
Yeah, it sucks when you've a film predates you that's so incredible like that, because you never got the experience of seeing it in the theaters for the first time.
Yes.
And that would be, I mean, it just shows you how great the film is when you can still love a film so much, even though you watched it on a VHS tape, in your parents' basement, for the first time, So I every opportunity I get to go back and watch something like that, I take it too. I totally understand what you're saying.
People sometimes ask, if you could go back to any era, time travel, anywhere, where would you want to be? My answer is always the same. May 25th, 1977, at the Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, seeing Star Wars for the first time.
With no recollection. with just going in as if you'd never seen it before too, you know?
Yeah, that would be the best. And seeing just the way that audiences would respond anytime I can be in a pop culture moment. Like I feel like Avengers Endgame was like that for this generation of people going in and seeing the conclusion of this epic story is so good.
Mm-hmm. Fair.
But Hellraiser, Josh, so you led me to believe that this was one of your favorite films, one of your top films, but you mentioned you had seen it for the first time, I think, a couple of years ago. So you didn't grow up on this movie. This is pretty recent that you got into it, right?
No, so I've said in past episodes, I grew up in a fairly conservative Christian household, and while I still am a Christian to this day, I am not conservative in some of my things, and as I said at the beginning of this episode, horror has been one of my favorite things to explore this year in 2020. Like I loved the genre coming into this year, but really this year kind of solidified it. I've been getting hardcore into like Stephen King books, and but this franchise in particular had been something that like I really wanted to kind of see. So like I started when I moved out, I started exploring franchises that were deemed forbidden fruit. So I started with Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Saw, just a lot of like horror franchises, Child's Play and stuff like that. And so this was kind of like on the list of things that like I needed to see, because Pinhead is kind of like a secondary famous face in the world of horror. And I loathed this movie the first time I saw it. I was like, Dan, I think me and you had like the same similar experience. Like I came out, I was like, what did I just watch? like what is this movie? And just it happened to come across a podcast talking about it, and so I gave it another shot. And my taste in film has definitely matured a lot to where I think that I've been able to grow a lot in my experience. And I think one of the things that kind of helped me in that was the stories and like the visual effects and the practical effects, and just the way that Brad, and you talked earlier about like how Barker sets up shots. There's one shot in particular where Julia brings home her first victim, and just the use of lighting, or like the lack thereof, the way that the natural light's coming in is just such a stunning portrayal of kind of like using like light and darkness, and just kind of how that is represented in such a similar shot. And he does that a lot in throughout the films and throughout this movie, and I think that he just does a real good job at it. But Dan, to answer your question, like this is still a relatively new experience, but like once I finally got it and like clicked, and I was like, I just need to dive head deep into all of these movies.
Have you seen all 10 iterations now?
I have.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And so my experience this year in Hellraiser was I watched all the movies, and then I would listen to podcasts on all of those movies. So I went from that, and then I read the Hellbound Heart, which is what this movie is based on, and then I was like, I ordered the Scarlet Gospels which is the literary sequel from Amazon shortly thereafter, and then I kind of tried to start exploring some of the comics that they did, and I didn't really like the comics. I know that's kind of like an unpopular opinion that Marvel was producing in the early 90s, and Boom actually ended up doing a contained series where Kirsty actually becomes Pinhead. And
oh wow,
Pinhead comes on Earth and actually ends up kind of like bringing Armageddon. It's crazy. But yeah, so I felt like head over heels for this series, the good and the bad. Like even the bad ones where I'm just like, man, like I can't wrap my head around this, but it's okay because like it's not the worst thing I've seen.
And yeah, I mean, you can also just respect how different it is, I think, because it's bold, and I always appreciate filmmakers that are bold, you know.
Yeah, so the guy that did the last, wrote and directed the last one, I can't remember his name. It's Gary something. I think it might be Dunbar. But I feel like that's not right. Give me 1 second because I definitely want to give this guy credit. So Gary Tunnicliffe is the guy's name. He was actually the production designer on the sequels 3 through 9.
Oh wow!
And they actually finally he was supposed to direct the 8th one, and then they actually ended up letting him direct the 10th one, and he just really understood it. It's probably the best sequel that they've done since 3, which again, unpopular opinion.
Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting to kind of see the way that these different filmmakers interpret things, and Dimension really went through this phase where they would take like non-traditional films, and one of the Weinsteins would basically just be like, this is a cop procedural, just find a way to squeeze Pinhead into it.
Wow.
So that's a large number of the sequels, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, the guy who's doing the next one, I'm actually a big fan of his work because I really like The Ritual in Southbound. So we'll see what he does with it. I mean, if it ever comes out, like you said, it sounds like it's having issues.
Yeah, you guys remember when like the early to mid 2000s when everyone was like, we should just start remaking all these classic slasher movies where we got Texas Chainsaw, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Dimension had started developing a Hellraiser reboot.
Mm-hmm.
And the
oh my gosh, there's 6 different writers on it. No, 5 different writers on it. This thing has gone through so many passes. Like when you have 5 different writers, that means that they're constantly just redoing the script.
Oh, no doubt. And so like the movie we were originally talking about, that Dan that you had come across in 2011, that movie was solely made so that Dimension could retain the rights. Mm-hmm. So basically what they did was they had a script, had it cast it, edit it, ready to go in 3 weeks.
That's absurd.
And I think it might have even been 18 days. But they did everything from writing it, editing it, casting it, filming it, pre and post production, edit it all within 18 to 21 days.
Oh my God.
I've done way less important projects in way more time than that. That's insane.
Yeah. The film we just shot we shot in 19 days, and we had like a week of pre-production. So doing anything in 21 days is just insane.
That's so I feel like, and I'm sure you can comment more on this. When I think about the timeline of movies being made, for some reason I have it in my head from when the Harry Potter movies were being made, and filming would take place over the course of like 10 months. Like it would be an insanely long time to do everything. But now I read, we just watched The Prom on Netflix, and I think the actual filming, it was between like January and March last year. It was like a few months, which seems to be a fairly standard timeline for most movies, unless it's like super big budget and a lot of stuff going on that you need to coordinate. But I'm still surprised at how quickly some of these movies come together, not counting pre and post production, which I'm sure takes up a significant portion, especially these days.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would say that on the very low end is 15 to 20 days. That's the bare minimum that professional films get made with. And then at the top end, like Avengers, they might be shooting for 6 months, piecemeal, just they're shooting it here, you're shooting it there, depending on actor availability, kind of just spacing it out over the course of a long time. I mean, the three Lord of the Rings were made over like 2 years, consecutive days. It was like crazy, right?
I was going to say, you can get the Peter Jackson budget and just go live in a place for 2 years and just film nonstop every day.
But a lot of high-end films still shoot in like 20 days. For instance, like Get Out, I know for a fact it was shot in 20 days, but they did overtime on many of the days. So they were going into 16, 18-hour days on Get Out. And one of the reasons that Blumhouse, their model is 20 days is because Blumhouse is the producer, the production company that made Get Out, among many other horror films. They're kind of like, I'm sure you guys know Blumhouse, but they do a lot of pre-production. So they do kind of like probably 3 weeks of prep for the 4 weeks of shoots. And as a result, they're a well-oiled machine by the time they get on set. So I think that's why they can get away with, 20 shoot days, as opposed to, because Blumhouse, I think their model is like $4 million, 4 to 5, which is pretty good. Like that's not horribly low budget, but it's not high budget for sure. It's low budget, but not super low budget. And so they manage that by just giving their crew and cast and director a lot of time to prepare, so that once they actually get to set, they're ready to go.
Also, to take into account, location is also something that if you're only shooting in one place, it is going to be a lot. Your production's going to go by a lot quicker. So, like, for Braden's movie, What Lies Below, the majority, if not all of the movie, takes place on a farm. And then you look at, like, we were talking about Hellraiser tonight, and Hellraiser, aside from a couple different shots, mostly takes place in one house.
Yep.
And that's, again, that's just the it
do you know what the budget was on Hellraiser?
I can certainly tell you. Give me 1 second.
I'm curious, because it does seem like, the special effects are so well done, and it's interesting because I don't think that skill exists at that level anymore, because we do so much VFX, that the things we used to rely on for practical effects are now just much more easily done through VFX. So I'm not sure how much those special effects cost back in the day. My guess is that they're a lot less expensive back then than they are now, because it's so rare to find people that still have that skill set. It's still, like, the long and short of it is I was very impressed. I thought it was a low budget film, and I was very impressed with what they pulled off with such a low budget.
So this movie was actually made for $1 million and saw a box office return of $14.6 million. And I don't intentionally know if that accounts for inflation or not. But another fun fact about this movie was originally it took place in Brooklyn. And they mentioned that, actually. And one of the financial backers would not back this movie unless it took place in London. So technically speaking, this movie is supposed to be set in London.
Mm-hmm. I just did a inflation calculator, and it's 1 million would be equivalent to 2.5 today. So it's still super low budget. Like, that's crazy that they could pull off that level of SFX and makeup and all those things. And one of the reasons is because they kept that one location throughout the whole film, more or less. I mean, there was a couple shots on the docks and some other things in Christie's apartment and stuff, but for the most part, they stuck with it.
So the special effects, I do want to say, though, I want to name drop him, and we'll provide a link for this in the description. There is a great article from Heather Wixon from dailydead.com, where she, a couple years ago, actually talked in depth about the influence of practical effects, specifically about Hellraiser. And Bob Keane does an amazing job on the practical effects in this movie. Just throughout the entire course of this movie, whether it is the cenobites or it is the final destruction of Frank in the end. So much of this movie looks just astonishingly amazing. And one of the things that I did want to talk about real quick before we kind of get into a little bit more of the mental health aspects of this movie, Dan, I am super surprised that none of your questions have involved the vagabond.
I feel like I know so little, I wouldn't even know to ask the question. So give me the answer that I seek that I don't even know how to ask or what to ask. Before I jump into that, we were talking about budgets and returns and stuff. I'm always interested by looking at those types of numbers, and I don't think box office success by any means correlates to how good or bad a movie is. But it one thing that I always liked, I'm a big fan of Paranormal Activity. I enjoyed that movie, and I thought, they did a lot with sort of limited resources and filming in one location. That movie was made with in the tens of thousands, very low tens of thousands, and it made millions worldwide. That's like one of the craziest box office successes that I've seen.
Yeah, the return on investment in some of those films, like a Blair Witch Project, was also another film that was made for 60,000 and gross like close to 100 million. And the franchise is still going. They remade it, a couple years ago. The interesting story about a tidbit I found out, and I can't even remember how I found this out, but Paranormal Activity, when it was first screened, it was bought by whoever the distributor ended up being for like $250,000, and then it sat on a shelf for years because they planned to remake it. They wanted to remake it with a larger budget, and then eventually they just said, "Screw it, let's just release it as is," and that's what they did. And it's unbelievable, but that's apparently the story behind it. And please forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but that I remember hearing that and just being blown away by the fact that they sat on the movie thinking they were going to remake it, and then they released it and still made hand over fist with the money, $200 million. So what a crazy success story that film was.
That would also be Blumhouse.
Oh, was Blumhouse the one that bought it?
It was Blumhouse.
Oh, no way.
Paramount was actually the one that distributed it. I don't know if they were the ones that bought it.
That's the company that I heard originally bought it and sat on it. It was definitely Paramount. That sounds really familiar. But I guess Blumhouse eventually said, "Let's just release it."
Yeah, and I mean they've released it at a kind of a good time to where there was this stale air in the horror genre, and they're like, let's do something new. And I mean, I don't feel like it would have had the same effect had the movie been released in any other fashion. Had it not been released in that found footage type thing, it would not have been the hit it was.
I also remember the marketing campaign being really smart because, they made the film for $10,000. So this thing doesn't look like a professionally made film necessarily. You know, they had to cut a lot of corners and just get it done. And so instead of showing a lot of clips from the movie, they actually showed audience reactions to people watching the movie for the first time, which was so smart if you think about it, because they said, well, we can't really show this clip because it looks like a home video. You know, how are we going to get people to watch the movie if it looks like a home video? And so they decided, well, we'll just show fans reacting to the home video, I guess. And my God, I mean, and I love that film too. I think it was so creative and it's so smart for this filmmaker. I always respect filmmakers who go, okay, we have very little money. You know, how do we make something with it? You know, I mean, and I've taken that advice to heart. I mean, I originally wrote What Lies Below for, you know, to make it for $100,000. You know, like that was the plan. Fortunately, we ended up making it for more than that, but you know, it was still very low budget film. And so you just have to, you know, like I always respect filmmakers that are able to take something with so little means and still make it, you know, compared to the heavy hitters in the industry. And that idea that thing sold like crazy despite the fact they shot it with a Handycam for 10K, you know?
Yeah. So Dan, to answer your previous question before Paranormal Activity and just the insanity of filmmaking and the industry sometimes, go check out our Mank episode because we talked severely about that. But I actually have seen this movie a few times and I still don't understand the vagabond / homeless guy. My theory is that he's basically like kind of like the keeper of the box, or like he's in charge of kind of like making sure that it's like still within like realm, or like I don't know. He's the box's keeper is my best guess.
I feel like I've been conditioned by movies over the years of people in markets selling strange things. I didn't even question it as to why he had it or why it appears to return to him by the end of the movie to then gift out to the next person. I just rewatched Gremlins for the first time since I was a very small child, to the point where I barely remembered the movie. And I completely forgot that Gizmo is taken from a Chinese Chinatown area, a shop, and he's picked up there. So yeah, there's a long history of movies just sending strange things out into markets.
I mean, let's not forget the fact that this dude turns into a wooden dragon at the end of this movie.
It's wooden? I didn't catch it was wooden.
It looks wooden.
Maybe it's a little model that they made in order to pull that off. It's like a miniature. I didn't even realize it. I didn't see it as wooden, but I totally buy it now that you said it. I think I just missed it.
Maybe he's like an extension of the box, because like the first couple times that I watched this movie, I would like hear people talking about it. They'd be like, yeah, the vagabond becomes like a dragon at the end of the movie. I was like, what? Like, did I miss something? And so like I didn't even remember the vagabond character until going back to rewatch it this past time, like being mindful of it, and then like seeing like, oh, it's like Christy, because like I kind of think that it's so in like, I guess like the best way to describe it, also like another theory, because I know that there are deleted scenes for this movie, and the character that is basically that's left out of this movie that was supposed to be in this movie is a character named Leviathan. And Leviathan is basically the devil of this universe. He is basically who Pinhead answers to and all the cenobites. And I'm almost thinking that their version of Leviathan is kind of this homeless guy.
That's what I didn't want to say it, but I thought that perhaps, you know, the vagabond is the devil, because, you know, the devil's supposed to watch but not influence. He's supposed to, you know, be around but not force things. He's supposed to kind of manipulate but not actively do things. So that was my interpretation of it. But yeah, but keep going. I'm curious.
No, I think that you're absolutely right. Like that was kind of my theory as well, is that he was nothing more than like you were saying, like the watcher, not necessarily the influencer.
Right.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I think that makes sense. I mean, it works if he is the keeper of the gateway to hell, which he literally is by keeping the box around. So,
and so one of the things that Kirsty ends up happening is there's a scene between her and her father where they're out to dinner, and he's kind of starting to notice that Julia is having these moments where she is like really not taking like this move extraordinarily well, and she just kind of seems distant. And so he's like, hey, could you just like friend her? And so she's like, like sure. And so the next scene cuts to her like going to the house to see Julia, and she actually ends up, this is the beginning where she starts to end up seeing a lot of the things that are going on with the lament configuration and Frank. And I feel like for this episode's mental health moment, the last like third of this movie is what she kind of goes through. Mm-hmm. Is the fact that here you have a girl that's experienced this traumatic event, but nobody believes her. Yep. And for me, I just kind of want to spend some time on that, and particularly talk about the controversy that sometimes comes with people that say, I am feeling suicidal, I don't want to live anymore. And how there are some people out there that make the claim, oh, this person's only saying this for attention. And I grew up around a lot of friends that had those desires. And for me, I was always kind of the guy that took everything seriously. And I think it's important to kind of take those seriously, because in those types of situations, you never know when someone's going to be telling the truth or not, and how that very much is life or death. And what Kirsty ends up going through does end up becoming life or death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a horrible. I think that there's a interesting culture too of, not. I mean, we're working on it, but mental health hasn't been fully accepted as a problem in our society yet. And it's very difficult for some of us, especially men, because men are programmed to be tough, get through it, grit your teeth, survive. And so it's tough to open up and to seek out help, and to communicate to people that you're struggling. But yeah, I mean, I don't understand the people who are cruel to those who, or dismissive of those who say, I'm really struggling, please help me. Even if it is for attention, if you're willing to go to that extreme to ask for it, there's something up and you need someone there, you know? So yeah, I get what you're saying. It's a very lonesome feeling to be experiencing depression or suicidal thoughts or addiction or anything like that and not have anyone to explain that to and to listen to about that.
And also, too, we talked about this in our Batman and Robin episode of all things, where you have this culture of shame that is built around that. And so when you hear that phrase, oh, don't believe them, they only want attention, people that are legitimately struggling, you have less of a chance
ostracized.
Because you're being ostracized, you have a less of a chance of them kind of going through. I know that I've had moments in my life where I just legitimately didn't want to live anymore, and because I was around that phrase so much, I was just like, I'm just gonna bury this deep. I'm sure it'll work itself out. And I mean, I lived with some really strenuous and dangerous mental health for years because of that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I actually had to experience the loss of a friend to suicide to really get out of that habit and to kind of like readjust my vision.
Mm-hmm. Something that I had also mentioned, Josh, you brought up the Batman and Robin episode. I mentioned about, I think a lot of people tend to be more hard on themselves and more critical on themselves. And to that, something I'm trying to practice myself, and I encourage other people to do the same, is just think about your best friend or someone you care about. And if they were to either make the same mistake that you made or same decision that you made or whatever you're beating yourself up about, think, you know, would you forgive someone else for if they made that same mistake? And if the answer is yes, be kind to yourself. Forgive yourself. Don't hold that over you, because I can pretty much guarantee no one else is. And it's just torturing yourself. So being able to work in some of those more positive mental health practices, it just makes it a little bit easier. And the next time that you encounter, you know, one of those problems, or if you're having a tough day, it just makes it, starting with kindness toward yourself is a really good starting point to dealing with some of those. And I know that's something that I'm trying to practice myself, and I'm trying to, you know, be more open to hearing people when they are struggling themselves. And just, Josh, I think you've said that, you know, so much starts with kindness, and that's where you got to begin.
Also, I want to, you know, really implement and challenge listeners that just not even saying something, but just listening goes a tremendous way. And, you know, I think we see this oftentimes in horror movies, where you have this final girl where she's trying to warn others of the dangers of the antagonist of the movie. And here we have it, you know, with Kirsty and Frank and Larry and the Cenobites, but when it comes to these situations of depression and depression bordering on suicide, you have this tendency to, you know, want to just kind of fix the problem. And sometimes what could make a person stay another day is just feeling validated and heard. Mm-hmm. And I think that it starts to break down a lot of those things. And another reason I think we fail to really start to talk and be open about mental health is because depression has this habit of making you feel like no one is going to know what I'm going through. Like, I can go and talk to, say, like Dan, and tell him about why I'm depressed, but he might not understand like the reason behind it. And I think that is another reason why we have this tendency not to go to people, is because we don't feel validated when we do open up.
Yeah. And depression is probably one of the hardest things to explain to people. I had a friend ask me, because I suffer from it as well. I had a friend ask me once, like, like, what's going on with you? Like, why does this keep happening? What is it? And I said, listen, man, it's like you're stuck in a pit, okay? And you're surrounded on four sides by muddy walls, and it's starting to rain, right? So those walls are getting muddier and muddier and slicker. And meanwhile, all your friends are on the top of the wall, and they're looking down at you, and they're reaching out their hand, and you say, just grab my hand, come on out. But no matter what you try, you grab the wall, you grip the wall, you just slip back down into the pit every single time. And it's impossible. And your friends are all looking at you like, well, all you have to do is just grab my hand and you'll get out. But sometimes it's just not that easy. They don't see the pit. They don't notice the rain. They don't realize how slippery the climb is. And sometimes the best thing a friend can do is just get in the pit and sit next to you for a little bit. You don't have to say anything to them. You don't have to even talk to them. You don't even have to like try to ask them what's going on. Just be there with them, and that makes such a huge difference. Just to have a buddy to watch a hockey game with, or, watch a movie with, or go and have a beer with, and, just stare at the television screen and in the bar, all of that stuff makes such a big difference. And it doesn't always have to be listening. It just has to be there. Like, just be present with that person. That makes such a big difference.
This is going to be a weird transition to make, but there is Dan, I know you haven't seen it yet, so I won't spoil the context, but there's a line from the HBO miniseries Watchmen where Dr. Manhattan says, "I'm finding it hard to be present." And that one line has struck me and challenged me so profoundly in 2020 to just be present, where you're not worrying about what is being going on in the world of the news or on Facebook or Twitter, like just being present with people and who's currently in your life. And I've tried to make it a habit to, if I'm around someone and they're conversating with me, like, I'm trying my best to legitimately hear and take in every single word that they're saying. Because like you're saying, Brad, like, sometimes you don't have to do anything or say something like super deep and spiritual or philosophical. Like, it just means being there. It means just grabbing a beer, a coffee, or a burger with that person and just making sure that they're laughing. And being married, I feel like, has really helped me in that as well. Is the early years of my wife and I's marriage, every time something was wrong emotionally, I'm trying to be that guy that is a man, and I'm just trying to fix it the best way that I can, and it only makes matters worse. And it's like one day finally someone screwed in the light bulb all the way, and I just started listening. And what difference that has just made, just making my wife feel validated and heard. Mm-hmm. And that's improved a lot of, taking that philosophy has also improved a lot of the same relationships that I've been able to have with some of my best friends now because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, hearing too is, it's my dad has this habit of always thinking that there's a solution to everything, that there's a right answer for everything.
That's my problem.
Yeah, and I suffer from the same thing, where I always have an idea of how we can fix this. And I think it's important to note that when somebody is going through depression and anxiety, there is nothing in the world that you can say that's going to make them have an aha moment. I'm just going to cut to the chase right now. They know, they've been dealing with this. They've dealt with it before. They're going to deal with it again. So don't think that you have some magic power that you can fix it, and that's fine. That's not what you're there for. You're there to just show that person that you care about them and that you hear them and that you're there for them, you know? And that's all you have to do. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to like make them realize something. None of that is even possible. You just have to be there.
I think it was one of my favorite shows I've been watching through recently has been The West Wing, and the late great John Spencer in one episode talks about the exact same pit that you just talked about a moment ago. And he says, a friend jumps down in there. Say, well, what are you doing? Now we're both stuck here. And a friend says, yeah, but I've been down here before and I know how to get out. And I think having that perception of having someone who has been through something similar is helpful. And when there's so many different things that a person can go through, and I think when you reach a tragedy, whether it's losing a family member or a friend, or going through a divorce or any number of things, having someone there who is able to relate on some level to that is helpful, because you're not getting the more anecdotal, words of wisdom and support and help, which those are great too. I don't want to put those down in any way. But it is nice having someone come in and say, look, like, I get this sucks. Nothing I say is going to make this better. I know that. But here is what helped me when I went through this, and maybe it can help you too figure this out. And if we're just going to hang out and watch a movie together, let's just do that. And we don't need to talk, and there's no pressure. It's just, let's just be together. And it's like, I'm here if you need anything.
Mm-hmm. I still remember one of the most profound things somebody ever said to me. Someone very close to me passed away. And this person who I was friends with, she had lost her brother at a very early age. And while everyone was telling me, they're in a better place right now, they lived a really good life, all that stuff that you get when somebody passes away, my friend just said to me, it's going to suck. It's going to suck the rest of your life. It's always going to hurt you. But I'll be here. Anytime you want to talk about it, I'll be here. And just realizing that she'd been through it, that she knows that it sucks and that it's not going to go away. And that even despite that, she was willing to listen to me whenever I needed to talk about it. That made such a difference. And it made me go, okay, now I understand like a little bit more that there's no solution to this grief. You just have to live with it. And I think that's very similar with depression, where there's no perfect answer to it, but you can live with it and you can overcome it, on a day by day basis.
Yeah, there are a plethora of resources that, you can do something as simple as, shooting a text to a friend or loved one, or going to call someone anonymously with the suicide prevention hotline, or even the text line, or obviously therapists and stuff like that are always available too as well. And something else that I think has been very therapeutic in my own mental health journey has been doing a podcast and just finding creative outlets to really take my mental health and, just give it positivity for those days that like I even feel sad and like just don't feel like motivated. Like this gives me something to do. And when I came to the Hellraiser franchise, that was kind of where I was at. I was really burnt out. I just was like looking for something that could fill the void of just giving me rest, and kind of like being creative to give me that spot. And Hellraiser just kind of met me at that moment. And I think that it's also it's also all about like directing that energy in a positive manner, whether that is sitting down and having coffee with someone and talking about it, or it's just those days where you need to be left alone and see what's on Netflix. Just finding a way to really deal with depression. Like you said, like depression is something that you learn to live with, but it's also something that doesn't have to lead to suicide. It doesn't have to lead to addiction or alcoholism. Like, it can be treated in healthy ways.
For sure.
It definitely can. And with, we do this podcast, we do this show, we talk about pop culture, we talk about movies, occasionally games, other things going on. And we love talking about that stuff. But of course, mental health is the reason that we are here. Which, one aside to that, Josh, you reminded me earlier. So I am on episode 2 of Watchmen. I started it last night, and I'm in love. That show is great.
Get the tissues for when you get to episode 9.
Oh man! All right. Well, I'm looking forward to going through that series, and it's been super fun, and it's been great. So definitely not what I was expecting, and really excited to see where this journey takes me. But as always, we look at a Rorschach rating for the movies that we review. So Josh, where does this land on your Rorschach scale, 1 to 5?
This sits very confidently at a 4, and I say that because just it has rewatchability, I think, and like you said, Dan, like, this is a very confusing film the first time you watch it, but it's very beautifully structured too, and so that's kind of something that I just adore about this film, and I love the mythology behind it.
And also props to making one of the most iconic villains in the history of cinema.
Yes. Seriously. I think I would come in, I'd give it about 3 Rorschachs for me. But honestly, that might go up if I rewatch it. I think with each rewatch, you could probably get a little bit more from this. And one of the strongest things it has going for it is its 97-minute runtime. So pretty easy to fit in between all the other hectic things going on around life. Braden, what about you? Where would you rate this film?
Oh my God, you're gonna make me rate a film? No,
I know that's gonna be challenging.
Look, he got into filmmaking so that he wouldn't have to do film ratings.
That's true. You're not the critic. You make the stuff, and then we just sit here and tear it apart. So,
yeah, I mean, it's tough for me because I'm like going through the review process right now, and we've gotten like a lot of great reviews, but there are people that are just brutal out there, like individuals that are just mean, that like to write their own personal reviews on our IMDb page. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't feel adequate enough to review it. I think that the fact that it has a villain that has stood the test of time, and that we're still talking about this film 30 years later, automatically makes it like at the very high end of the scale. Like, you have to give it a 4.5, a 5 just for that, because films don't do that. They just don't. Films are shot, distributed, forgotten. I mean, does anybody remember off the top of the head what won the Academy Award 5 years ago? That was an Oscar-winning film. But everybody knows Hellraiser. Everybody knows the Hell Priest. So I guess I have to give it a 5 just for that. Like, it's literally a film that has withstood 4 decades at this point, and is still here and is still being talked about.
Similar to the point you just made, I've been salty for a long time that at the 1978 Academy Awards, Annie Hall won Best Picture, and Star Wars lost to Annie Hall.
Nobody remembers that Annie Hall.
Yeah, I'm probably the one person, and also the people probably personally who worked on Annie Hall. But the way I clap back is like, you know what? Is there an Annie Hall park in Disney World? No.
Yeah.
Does it have like a huge expanded universe? All of these novels, all of these games? No. So which movie was the better one there? Come on.
Right. Exactly. I always feel like you can't really say what's a good or bad film. You have to say what film you like and what you dislike.
Yeah.
And when a film is liked enough that it's been around for this long and still being talked about and still painting images in people's minds, then it's that, and that is the pinnacle of movie making. If I ever made a movie that people were still talking about 30 years later, I would think that a life mission had been fulfilled. So you got to give Hellraiser props in that.
I've been thinking about that a lot recently. I'm sorry, Josh, you can go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, to answer your question, Braden, it was Birdman.
Birdman. What was the question?
Oscar winner.
Oh,
Best
the
Picture,
Oscar winner 5 years ago. Yes. Okay. I was like, well,
I'm a movie
did
nerd,
you remember
so
that, or did you have to look it up?
I looked it up, but I was like, I'm pretty sure it was either Spotlight or Birdman.
Yeah. No, there you go.
Yeah, the Oscars could be a whole other conversation, but I love so many different types of movies for so many different reasons, and so I always like to refer to Kong Skull Island as the Academy Award-winning film Kong Skull Island, because that string of words just makes me so happy, and it did win for visual effects, so it has at least one Oscar. It might have gotten a second one. But likewise, I've been thinking about just film throughout time, and I watched Seven Samurai for the first time this summer, and seeing that it was released in 1957, I believe, late 50s, and just realizing that the vast majority of the actors I'm seeing on screen are likely not alive anymore. The people involved with it, of course, Kurosawa directed it. It's just watching this movie in 2020 when it came out so long ago, it just makes me think, like, did they realize then when they were filming this movie that, like, some dude in his living room 60 years from now is going to be watching it and being like, oh, this movie is cool. This is awesome. I think about that a lot. Anytime you put like art into the world like that, it just kind of takes on a life of its own, which I always like to appreciate and thank whenever we do have content creators on here. Thank you for what you do with filmmaking and with writing and directing. That's, I know, an incredibly difficult field to be in to begin with. And of course, going through the reviews, it can get difficult as well. So it definitely takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of creative energy. So thank you. And I'm really excited to check out your movie. I'm going to add it to my list for this weekend because it looks awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
And
go ahead.
Sorry. I also want to say, like, just kind of coming off of what Dan was saying, this year for us, as a publication, we've definitely jumped into a lot more of these kind of press interviews. Like, creator interviews have always been something we've done, but not to the extent that we've done this year. And just kind of hearing about some of your behind the scenes in process of writing this movie and crafting its visual style has been a huge encouragement as well, to kind of see, like, you know, I feel like hearing you talk about that, I had a greater reverence for that movie, your movie, after getting the chance to interview you the first time. And then so guys, please go check out the interview we did with Braden a couple weeks back.
No, it was great chatting with you, and I'm so glad you liked the movie so much. And you know, it please ignore the IMDb haters and check out our film. And it seems to be being received well by the critics, and I'm glad to get that first one out there in the world, and look forward to hopefully making more and touching base with you guys whenever I do, you know.
Absolutely. Well, you are more than welcome to come back. Maybe we'll bring you back to promote the Blu-ray.
Love it.
All right. Well, where can people find you online, or where can people find the movie online?
The movie is pretty much available anywhere you can rent online. It's in the in theaters now section. It was supposed to have a small theatrical release that's been mitigated due to COVID. So you can go on Amazon or iTunes or your cable provider in the rental section. All of those are places that you can find it. And then for me, I'm most active on my Instagram. My Instagram is at director_BRD. And yeah, you can reach out to me. I've already gotten some hate mail from that film, so please be nice about if you're going to reach out. Yeah, I look forward to hearing from you guys.
All right. Well, Dan, since you tweet so much about video games, where can people find your adventures on the PS5?
I do. You can follow me over at drock6499. As I mentioned in the Batman and Robin episode, I was one of the 12 people able to procure a PS5. So I do have one. I've been playing it a lot. I love it. And I post a lot of screenshots and video grabs right from the console. So if you want to follow me, see what games I'm doing, see what crazy, cool, ridiculous stuff I'm doing in Grand Theft Auto 5, feel free to follow me over there.
And thank you guys so much for just this year, for every listen, for every like, for every retweet, for every review that you guys have read, episode that you downloaded, likes, subscribes, and just more. We've enjoyed getting to grow with you guys, and we are definitely excited for 2021. And this next sentence is something I never thought I'd ever say. But Dan and I will be back very early next year, our very first episode of the new year. The two of us together will be covering the duology of Sharkboy and Lava Girl.
I just want to say, when I consented to this, I thought we were just doing the new movie, but I'm excited to dive into the original as well. I'm both so happy and yet so upset that we're kicking off 2021 with Sharkboy and Lava Girl, but that's the world we live in, and I'm just gonna ride it for now and be happy.
To be fair, the first movie we're going to be doing next year is going to be Wonder Woman 84, but the first movie that you and I are going to be doing together will be Sharkboy and Lava Girl.
Okay, Wonder Woman 84 is brought. Well, I don't want to pit them against each other. They're both fine films. I'm very happy we are reviewing both of those.
Anyways, we'll catch you guys, but you guys can find us everywhere at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Letterboxd, all at Victims and Villains, wherever you guys get your podcast from. And most importantly, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net, where not only can you guys find access to all previous episodes, social media links, movie reviews from Dan, myself, and a plethora of other phenomenal writers, but you guys can also find, most importantly, our suicide prevention library, the real heartbeat for why we do this show. So, until next time, remember, the box. We opened it. We came.